It will take nothing short of 100 proof living to restore lives. Join a conversation between a cop and a criminal with Brian Yates, Chris Pridmore, and featuring Caitlin Meath, working to inspire and motivate others, rebuilding the communication breakdown. This is the 100 Proof Living Podcast.
Well, welcome back to Conversations with a Cop and a Criminal. I'm Brian Yates.
I'm Caitlin Meath.
And I'm Chris Pridmore. And today we have a guest with us today, Donna and Dewey Fladd. And they're ahead of the project Marshall's Way. We're going to get into the story quite a bit here in a little bit. But all I can think of when I see everything about what you're doing is powerful. The word just comes to me, powerful. And there's nothing that you've been doing this that isn't top notch and isn't very heartfelt and touching lives. So really excited about having you guys here today.
Thank you.
With most of our shows, we start off with each one of us getting into some details, and there's some things that I wanted to update. First of all, found out last night that South by Southwest has been canceled because of the coronavirus. I thought it was a joke at first because my brother's the first one to tell me. When he's telling me something, I usually check it with some humor must be behind it, but it actually had been canceled. So a little bit disappointed about that, but as with all things, some of the connections going into it, I think will further our message and further our work anyway. Show that there's a need for addressing trauma and leadership. This is not just a homeless person's problem. It's not just, it is a professional problem too, the stuff that we're working through. So pretty excited about that, where we're going to head, regardless of what happened with South by Southwest. I did have a story this week that really struck me about how we walk past people and don't realize, and it is somewhat coming out of what was preparing for in Austin. We just don't know what people are going through. We have no understanding what actually is going on in people's lives. And I have a very dear friend of mine that has gone through some significant trauma, lost a loved one to street violence, was a victim of street violence, and has gone into a season of recovery. But you wouldn't know, looking at this person from the outside in, that there was any of that history. Just looks like a normal human being and it had all this history. Had a friend overdose and pass away over a couple days ago, and you still wouldn't know that this person was going through this trauma and these major events. But all it took was going to a group about trauma, and it released a lot of bad memories, days of trouble, and things like that. And I guess the thing that really just struck me out of that conversation interaction is, A, we don't know. We don't know what people are going through. B, we don't know what's going to trigger it. And when it does trigger, sometimes you got to let them get it out. Let them deal with that. And so for me, my takeaway was I need to tread lightly. I don't know what's going on with people around. I don't have the perspectives that they do on situations. And I am no expert in anybody else's problems, really, but the mess that I've made for my life and I'm trying to get back. So it really struck me. And I think especially going to this interview is we just don't know what people are going through. All we can do is offer a hand, make eye contact, and be there for them. So it really struck me with that. But the last thing I really wanted to get into is just partnerships that we have here too, and make sure that people that understand who's alongside and sharing the word with us. And Eagle Star Housing has decided to come on board. And Eagle Star Housing you'll see a lot more prominent imaging about them. I've mentioned them on the show before. It's a homeless shelter for veterans. They believe in our mission. We believe in theirs. And so we're going to, make sure we're getting the word out about them. And then Circa Talent, which is a executive recruiting agency that I happen to work for as a recruiter in lab diagnostics. They also believe in what we're doing. And what I love about them is that they have violated stigma by hiring me. And I love it, is they believed in me and my skill set and didn't care about my history. If I can prove myself and do my work, that's all that matters. And they've given me the opportunity, and so they're going to get behind what we're doing here too. So I wanted to start off with those few things. We always try to keep things couched in perspective, and that's my perspective on this week. So Brian, what do you have?
Well, it's interesting. We hadn't compared notes on this part of it, and mine is kind of similar. This idea of working alongside someone and not knowing what they're going through. And, last week we talked about it's election season, and so there are now some law enforcement impacting elections coming up, whether it's in state Congress or state legislature and sheriff's offices. And there's a much greater focus now forward into the community versus just how do you manage the budget for the jail and for your street officers or deputies. And I go back to a story where I had a fellow officer that had multiple suicide attempts, and finally, obviously, relieved of duty, and has moved on. But what's interesting is nobody stopped even after he was dismissed, nobody stopped to do an inventory of, you know what, how are the rest of us doing? And I think as we move forward in through elections, and there's going to be some leadership change, that one of the things that with 100 Proof Living, that I really want to focus on, we've talked about some of a kind of a corporate approach to changing culture, is the same thing in law enforcement. And that's working with leadership to say, you can't just go past an event like that, like a speed bump, and just keep going. And with the rising number of suicides with veterans and in law enforcement and other first responders, we have to do something. And so there's an opportunity for us to lean into and come alongside law enforcement leadership and just help them to, take a breath after the elections are over and after there's some leadership changes, and really start to sharpen their focus on, collectively what's going on, whether it's someone gets outed for a substance abuse problem, or there are other issues that impact an officer. Leadership needs to go back and do that inventory. And so we talked before about early on, when the psychological profiles are done, using those as benchmarks. Obviously, city and county leadership or state leadership decide that you were psychologically healthy and fit for duty when they hired you based on that profile. You need to use that as a benchmark along the way, just so that people that might have issues going on internally, something like that could help flag it, because there is a culture of don't say anything. You don't want to reach out and ask for help, because then you're no longer the superhero. And so I think in the coming weeks and months, there's opportunities for us to start coming alongside some of that leadership, raising an awareness, and then it's going to have to be kind of a ground level, give people the confidence to step forward. There's this, even out in society, just in recent years, is mental illness really getting some of the attention it needs, but that's because of collective embrace. Family members and friends are starting to understand that, a lot of us deal with some of these issues, and it's okay. And so when we can change the culture to be like, it's okay, let's come up with a solution and work on it, and then we can move forward, versus, being stuck in the mud here with a lot of the catastrophe that's going on around us. And for a long time in mental illness, nobody was willing to even talk about it. I lost an aunt that suffered from mental illness most of her life. And that was like nobody talked about her. It was the family really didn't want some of her issues outside to be known, and certainly loved her, but there was still the stigma behind it. And so working forward again to crack those stigmas, whether it's mental health issues or just psychological issues for PTSD. That's something that I'm excited that we're going to be kind of having now an outreach into some law enforcement leadership. So that's all I've got this week. Caitlin, what do you have going on?
All right. Thanks, Brian. So I wanted to start off by saying, I greatly value all of the guests that we have on this show, but for me today, Donna and Dewey, being here with you in this room and having the opportunity once again to hear your story and your message, it's truly an honor for me. And, we'll get into that, but the fact that you've asked me along the way to be a part of some of your interviewing and outreach like that, I feel like the honored one. And I think what you're doing is just completely incredible. You have all of my respect. And I also can feel how it feels in the room right now. And it's a somber feeling, and I want you to know that I'm right here with you. And so, on a little bit of a different note, at the Recovery Center, I want to touch on that, because I feel like that is something that is critical, if not downright life or death, for those of us who are living life with a substance use disorder. The Recovery Center, again, it's a place of wellness and healing and hope. And we offer all recovery-based and recovery-oriented services. So our programming, because the volume of people coming in has substantially increased within the last few weeks, which is beyond exciting. I almost can't put into words. We also have to up our game with our programming a little bit, and what do people want to see? And one of those things being how this disease impacts family and community at large. So by implementing things like Donna, by implementing things that can provide that outlet and that outreach for family and community, not just the person who is struggling with substance use disorder. So I think we're finding like just a really greater outreach, and I couldn't be more ecstatic about that. Actually, the center has been booming with voices and laughter and music, and it's a lot by the end of the day. My head's kind of spinning, but it's, I think of the individuals that, Donna and Dewey, your son, and I think about the individuals I have lost, and I envision them at the recovery center, and I think that they surely could have found some connections and some peace by finding, like-minded individuals. So, I want to be sure to say that I do what I do because I care about your son. I care about my daughter's father. I care about my cousin. I care about all those that we have lost. That's my fuel and my passion for what I'm doing. So I really want that to be understood. And so, an individual said to me last Sunday, I facilitate a group, just storytellers. It's a place we can all just be one, and we can say what's on our minds without judgment, without fear, and oftentimes with immense relatability. And someone thought that the group was ending, and he came up to me and he used the word distraught. He said, I was distraught. I thought you weren't having this group anymore. And I didn't realize that there was actually some value and some impact behind these groups. So that was... And I assured him it's not ending, and, of course, value his presence there immensely. So I think as far as, touching on Marshall's Way documentary, I'm going to kind of pass that along, and I'll step in as we go.
Okay. One thing that you were just commenting about, the feedback you're getting from the storytellers, don't you think that's a lot of the reason why you're seeing the growth in connections as it is? Because the word's starting to get out a little bit? I'm curious about that.
I do. I think it's the engagement piece. Once you engage with one individual, they tell their friends. I've seen things on Facebook saying, hey, you got to check this place out. And as soon as someone checks it out, it's very simple. You sign in, and then we really kind of surround you with a lot of love and support. I don't know who wouldn't grasp onto that, and give them the calendar of our events right away. There's no membership fee. You don't need to provide us with anything. We just want you to be with us.
I'm curious what you're seeing, why the volume increased, because I noticed in church too. Like church was packed this week too. I'm like, it wasn't like the weather was even all that much better. What is that all about?
I think a lot of that goes back to, the engagement, but also the awareness that we're talking about it, whether it be on social media or it be with our friends at a coffee shop. We're finally talking about these issues that, Brian, you talk about with mental health, were so taboo and stigmatized. So it's kind of like it's the cool thing to go down to Connections and grab a cup of coffee and talk about our plans or things that are on our mind. Like, that's the thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of people checking in and just coming in even for 10 minutes. They have other places to be, but they want to be able to see us and maybe just sit down and talk with someone.
Sense of community.
Yes.
Yeah, that is good. I think you guys are really welcoming that way. I mean, there's been a lot of times I've even used it for that very thing, just to kind of get in, and I'm in a place where they're expecting nothing than a person in recovery to be there. And when I'm not anything else there, just a butt and a seat, talking to people, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes those days that's enough.
Often more than enough.
For sure.
We're finding.
Yeah.
Real quick, Caitlin, especially now as we get into a dramatic story about a family. We've talked about this before. Sometimes, people that view this show, people that even go to our website or people that we're connecting with aren't always the ones at the worst place in their life, but a lot of family and friends are. Would you encourage family or friends to come in and check out the center just so that maybe they can be the conduit to someone that needs help? Because, we think of our worst hours and all of the stories that we've heard and the people that we know in their worst hour, they're not out canvassing the street for a place that's providing love and support. They're in a deep hole that they've dug, and they're sometimes feeling just all alone in that. But if a family or friend could reach down to them and say, hey, here's a place for you. How would it feel for a family or friend of someone that's struggling with addiction to come into Connections and just kind of ask questions?
Absolutely. I think you bring up a good point. And because at the core of this, we all are we're more similar than we are different. but we're finding that there's pockets of folks that kind of gravitate more towards certain groups. So now, for instance, we have 2 individuals interested in starting a veterans group. And although we're going to be talking, they would be talking about probably very similar issues when it comes to substance use disorder or recovery, we're finding that different pockets of individuals need their different outlets. So we have that veterans group. We have a craft support group, which is for the family and friends. And so I think there's a lot of misconception that, you just need to have a drug problem in order to show up and come through our doors. And that is not the case. And that is sort of the point of this all, is that it is affecting this community and communities everywhere like a ripple effect at large.
Oh, that's great.
Great. Well, thank you for the update that you did share. This interview that we're doing today is powerful, and so I use the word powerful in so many ways. And part of it is just the relationship that we have with Caitlin. Brian and I talk a lot about Caitlin behind her back, but just the work that she has for us, a lot of times we feel like we want to make sure she's okay, like the stuff that's happened in the past, and she does the same for us, so it's that type of thing. But as a byproduct of her heart for you, we've really learned to love and get behind what it is that you're doing. And I'd like to introduce Donna and Dewey Fladd to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing fine, thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
We would like to get into some of your product, but I want to make sure that you understand. I'm a father, and your story is, when I hear your story and then I see what Caitlin's stories and the recovery that she's had and the person in front of you right now carrying on the message that you're doing in an everyday basis. So it's not just your project, but the work that you're working on. She's actually a voice for every day, and actually has been that way around Brian and I too. So I want to thank you for being bold. Would like to know, for our audience, what you're involved in, what you're working on, a little bit of your story. But from a respect perspective, one of the things I appreciate about it is how aggressive you've been. You went after some way, somehow, to deal with your pain.
Yeah. That's the only way to really, I was going to comment about our dramatic story, It's dramatic, but it's also real common. And that was where we just were like, this isn't going to be, Marshall's death is not going to be a statistic. He is. His death by overdose, heroin, fentanyl, is happening all over. And we need to speak up and speak out when we felt so alone. People, when I would try to talk about Marshall's addiction, it'd be like, oh, you can't talk about this at work.
Or family parties.
It would be like, a bummer.
So just for our audience, Marshall is your son.
Yeah.
Yep.
Marshall died on March 1st, 2018, after dealing with substance abuse for at least from 2012, probably prior to that, but that's when we first realized and were notified that he was using heroin.
Okay.
So then we battled with him for, 6 years before he died, a year ago, March 1st.
So yeah, you're on an anniversary date here too, which we really hadn't planned going into this. So
yeah, anniversaries suck.
We planned. When you mentioned March 7th, we did talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's after.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So where are you guys at in your journey? And this one of the things that Caitlin brings out an awful lot is about the fact that this is a healing journey. We're not talking about an event, a project. At least from our perspective, this is obviously giving back to a community and understanding your story. But how are you guys doing this? Where are you at with your journey?
Well, the first year it's really traumatizing. I physically couldn't move, and function was like taking a shower. It was really I got to take a shower this week, and then getting back into work, and so we were struggling. Well, I know you were too.
Oh yeah.
And then started talking about, well, what are we going to do with this? Is this the way it's going to be? I can't picture living.
Yeah, the grief. The grief was overwhelming. We've all had people die in our family. Parents maybe, and uncles, aunts, and whatnot. But when Marshall died, it was like so consuming. It was so heavy. So you know, we kind of prepped for it. You know, when you got a kid who uses heroin, you know, any day he goes out the door, even in your house, he could be the last, but you don't really, I guess you just don't grasp the scope of it till you get the call. I get the call at 2:20 in the morning, woke up, the trooper said, "Mr. Fladd, your son's dead." You know, pretty much like that. And it's like all of a sudden within a fraction of a second, your whole world shifts.
Yeah, it's part of our DNA. You know, our kids are made of us.
Is gone. Yeah, we physically felt that. We feel his absence physically. You know?
Then shifting from a family of 4 to a family of 3.
We have a daughter who lives in Charlotte, so.
So we're still trying to, you know, and we have a sense that Marshall's all around us, but it is different, you know. Yeah. So where we're at, we're here. We're sitting right in this room. Yeah. We're like, no. We got to do something about this. We have to do something with this information.
That we've went through for the last bunch of years.
Yeah, as parents, like, how do you have this young, beautiful person just change before your eyes, and you don't really know? You try this, and it's like, oh, don't do that. You try that. So
I wish we had the community center when our son was alive. I mean, what you're doing, I mean, I know we're getting sidetracked, but
that's good.
That type of place, instead of him sitting in the apartment or just waiting for an AA meeting or whatever, it could be a game changer.
I think what you're describing, though, is the complexities of this. I think as an outsider looking in, we look very linear. We say, okay, you lost your son, and there's a grieving process related to you losing your son, and oh, by the way, there's a side effect that we happen to be addiction, so there's a larger cause. But what I'm hearing in your voice right now is the overwhelming volume of things that had to be addressed emotionally alone.
Right.
I would suspect there's probably even competing feelings of guilt, sadness.
Oh yeah. And on top of that, I didn't realize, like, canceling Social Security cards, figuring out he had a TIA, CREF, savings, he had bank accounts, and we're still trying to get a grip on our reality.
Erasing our son's existence in a way, you know what I mean?
And then not.
Yeah.
And that's where we, years ago, as our family of 4, we watched The Way. It was on Friday nights we would have pizza party nights and watch a movie, and we'd be all excited. Our kids were fairly little. So we pulled out when they had videos of VHRs, we watched, it's called The Way. And it's a story about a pilgrimage. It's actually kind of a trek people make through France, northern Spain, all the way to the west, to a cathedral, Santiago de Compostela. And it was really poignant. A father, dentist, 9-to-5 guy, his son dies on the El Camino. And his father was not approving of his lifestyle, being a wanderer, explorer. And the father goes out to get his ashes. And while he picks up his ashes, he decides to walk the pilgrimage for his son. So we were like, it was a beautiful movie, and it was very, like, moving and kind of family. And so we talked about it. In our family, we like to travel. We traveled really well together. We enjoyed our, time together. So we talked about doing it. And over the years, we talked about doing this pilgrimage, and it never happened. There never was a real good reason to.
Well, life got in the way.
Life got in the way.
Kids are in school, and then our son becomes, involved with drugs, heavy drugs, but I guess where we're kind of going with this is that for over a year, when Marshall passed, we didn't know what to do with ourselves. We were lost. We were dealing with the grief. And we started walking is kind of just a way to get out and clear our heads. We'd walk to Wegmans. We live right in Canada. We'd walk up to the library and whatnot. And as we started walking more and more, Donna always, sometimes we walk in silence for an hour or two, and sometimes we talk, but she started always feeling the need we had to do more than just let this grief envelop us. And, I should write an article, we should start a group, but nothing coalesced around something concrete. And then, out of the blue, I was in the Peace Corps years ago. I had a buddy contact me and said, hey, would you like to walk the Camino? This was in July, just this past July. And I told Donna, and we're like, yeah, that might be a good idea. But again, didn't really coalesce. And then we happened to go out to dinner with our good friends, Kevin and Mary Schoonover, who we're working on the project with. And this idea of working on a documentary of our journey through addiction, our son's death, everything just kind of came together in this wonderful conversation we had with these people. And Kevin's a graphic designer, photographer. Mary is a writer, journalist. Donna is an expert in addiction and psych. I'm a photographer. And so we were like, wow, we got some talent here. Maybe we could tell our story to help people about the path we've been through with our son's addiction. So that's kind of where we got to this point.
And I think that what I love about that is that you are taking the tools that are there and taking it to a next level sort of thing. And rather than just having it be talking about a story, because I'm not trying to minimize your story at all, but
Right.
there's a lot of stories out there,
Right.
and it can get lost. I believe in your passion. I can see it. It's right here. We're feeling what you're feeling. I mean, I get that, and it means a lot because we're pretty passionate people here too.
Yeah.
But one thing I find interesting about what you're talking about here is that you're approaching it similar, and I can relate to this in a lot of ways. They always tell us to shy away from monuments. Like in my recovery and some of the things, I have a lot of regret and guilt and things that I struggle with pretty heavily, especially related to my children.
Right.
They tell you to steer away from the monuments. I actually embrace them as milestones or things that I can draw to as inspiration. When I think of Marshall's Way, this documentary that you're working on, and the trip that you're doing, that's something that the reach that can have and the relatability that it can have. I can tell you every single time I see anything about this movie or hear about it, or whatever else, it's going to draw completely back to your story.
Well, it's become a metaphor for our journey, for people in recovery, their journeys, for other families. It's physically, it's good. It's also become the topic where we're here, doing this broadcast or doing other things in the community where people want to hear about it. So if we just wanted to say, hey, can we talk on your radio show? It's like, oh, okay. But it's become more, with the pilgrimage.
I'm getting people at the gas station. I'm getting people at Wegmans. I'm getting people all over who are like, thank you for talking about this.
Right.
And the movie is helping us talk about it, the project is, but there are just so many people suffering. Like when you opened up, we don't know what people are going through. And I'll just tell a real short, quick story. The day Marshall died, our daughter was flying in from Charlotte at like 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock. We got her ticket right away, and there's a blizzard coming in the afternoon. So we're like, our son just literally died 3 hours ago. We're like, we got to go to Wegmans. We have no food in the house for our daughter, and we just wanted to, be together and eat and love each other, not leave. And we're going through Wegmans, and we're crying, and every other minute coming down the aisle. We're in the pasta aisle, I'm bawling. Then I go over to the coffee aisle, I'm bawling. But there's a guy going through with his girlfriend at the same time, and he is one angry man. He is pushing the cart, and he's hollering, and I was so angry. It was like, how dare he? Doesn't he know what I'm going through right now at this minute? And literally every aisle I'm encountering, and at the end, I got it in my head is like, damn it, he's going through stuff right now just like I am. So maybe I better back up a little bit, knowing that he's going through that. And that was like epiphany to me, that people are going through stuff every day we don't know about.
But what I think it speaks volumes to your character as a human being. I cannot imagine a more devastating thing to go through than the loss of any one of my children. I've got 3. I got 2 boys and a girl. That would be terrible for me. But to have that awareness, it shows a real gift and your heart in terms of moving forward. Don't you think a lot of what you're doing right now, you've already begun your pilgrimage, though?
Absolutely.
I mean, this is we're actually on the trail right now.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Pilgrimage starts at your door.
Yep. So yeah, it's really exciting, and how things just keep coming together. Meeting Caitlin.
Oh yeah.
And then how someone says, "Oh, call this person." Greer and his and oh, do this and what's changed is I'm in the yes, yeah, okay, sure. That's so the fear factor is for most of it's like it's gone. It's like, okay, the worst has happened. What more can I be afraid of?
Right. Our son died.
Sure,
What more can happen?
Sure, I'll walk this 140 kilometer thing. It's like, okay, but okay, I'll do it.
Is Dr. Scholl's sponsoring you guys by any chance?
That's a good point. Right?
Might get fundraising there.
Yeah. No, but we're getting a lot of people like Caitlin. Again, she was brave to come out and tell her story to us. And other people have done that. Other people who are struggling with their addiction, who are in recovery or not recovery, and that takes a lot of strength. Yeah.
And how brave. And as parents, it's like we're standing with you. We stand up and we're with you. Yeah. And I think some kids are so afraid, or they're so beaten down about, I can't. I did this again, and it's like, okay, you did it again. It's okay. It's okay, get back on track, and we're right here.
Slipping. When Marshall was using, I had the mindset that if he slips, it's back to zero. It's starting all over. And I wish I could be with him now where I could say, it's okay, man. If you slip, we're here. We're going to help you. We're going to help you rise up. It's okay that you slipped, and not like put the guilt that you slipped and you're a bad human being. How dare you? And I just hug them and let's do what we can. Let's start over, whatever it takes. Right? If they're alive, you got a chance.
Dewey, let me jump in here for a second, because I think what you're talking about now is something that should be highlighted. And as much effort and passion as you're putting into this to help others, I would say what you're doing now is you're wishing there were things that you could have said or done differently to him. And I think that's the passion that has to be shared with other parents, right? It's this idea that, and I go back to, hearing just your brief overbrush of the death notification from the trooper. I've had to be a part of those. And I wish there was a way that I could encapsulate that moment and hand it to other parents and say, the stigma of something being wrong with your child, the stigma of your child using drugs, pales in comparison. I've had parents just fall down on the floor and start screaming, partly because they knew it was coming. Most of the time it's shock and they can't believe it. Right. But when there's drugs involved, or when there's a lifestyle that's, a risky lifestyle that's involved, the second they see us at the door, they know what's going on, and it just hammers them. And I think the message that you can share, and I would pull no punches, is to say that in that moment, and from that moment since, my pilgrimage has so much pain that it blows away any embarrassment you might feel to acknowledge that your child has a mental illness issue, or not even a child, a spouse.
Right.
Anybody that's out there that hears this needs to feel the pain that's in that studio right now, and feel the pain that parents and family members and friends go through to such a degree that it becomes their vivid reality, and they're willing to go do something about it, to reach out in love and to say, hey, it's okay, we love you, we're going to go through this with you, and to shoulder up next to people instead of kind of keeping it at a distance because they don't understand. Go understand. Go figure it out, and make sure that you can prevent that moment of that death notification from a police officer.
Right. Amen to that, man.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marshall was sober almost 14 months, and he had gone through a lot, and it was such a shock, his death, because we thought he was
on the path.
And when it came out of left field, it wasn't like when he was an active user. You have more of a inkling that maybe he could die at any moment. But 14 months sober, that was like a kick in the head, man. It was hard.
You see a lot of that, though. I know post-release incarceration, it's like a 99% overdose rate. Wow. Because their tolerance is down, but they're using at the level they once were.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, Caitlin, if you're seeing this around the connections, but I know I work as a peer at Thompson Hospital in the ED, and there's usually the overdose there. It's been a lot of times it's been people that have just had abstinence for a period of time, and they jump back in. I think of one gentleman that came in, and he had a he overdosed on crack actually and hadn't been used. He was just released from a long season in prison, and now he's changed his kidney function for the rest of his life in one day. And I mean, it's tragic, but kind of to Brian's point, he uses vivid reality an awful lot, and it's so true, because we can understand things, but until it's something that's so vivid, it changes your emotion about it. It doesn't change anything. And we're really about trying to get upstream in prevention.
Right.
Brian's had a number of these notices where he's actually personally had to deliver them. And some of the tragedies that he's experienced in his life, just being there, that's vivid to him. So when you're talking about this trooper coming to your door, that's vivid. One of the things I think that, and Donna, you and I talked when we first met, we talked a little bit about this, but just if you could share a little bit with the audience, how are you managing? I think that in the world we're living in, there's less people that don't get it somewhat, but there are those parents and those other families out there that have not been touched by this, and you have to somewhat manage, what they think or do, and sometimes that does hit you. You're talking about, we did everything we could, so to speak, that he's kind of, I forget how the conversation was actually going, but how do you deal with these families that haven't actually experienced what you experienced? They may have sympathy for you, but they haven't dealt with it.
I can't, they haven't dealt with it. I guess I can't worry about that. Mm-hmm. I just have to keep doing what I'm doing and what I know is the right thing to do. And, thank God that they don't know, it's like, that's cool. If you don't get it, that's beautiful. And that's great. Having a child with cancer, having a child with early onset diabetes, and seeing them in pain in the hospital or having to go through treatments, that's, in some ways, that's kind of having a child who has a chronic disease and an illness. And if it's not managed, they're going to die. That's addiction.
But you could talk about that openly.
You can talk about that openly. And, it's a somber conversation. It's frightening.
But you can have it, yeah.
Relate to that. There's, and addiction is that, and that's breaking down the stigma, being able to talk about it, to be, that this is, it is real. Your kid can get sick, and
I just had a local farmer who donated to our walk, and he has grandkids, and he doesn't know anybody personally, but he was really thankful that we're talking about it, because he's like, I don't know if I could do this. I'm like, like we've talked, what's worse, talking in public that your kid has an addiction or your kid dying? I mean, like we were talking, there's nothing worse than your kid dying. Nothing.
Right.
So what we're doing, putting ourselves out there, trying to educate people that it's crappy. There's young people dying every day. It's hard. I mean, there's times I'm like, why are we putting ourselves out there so much? But I'm like, what do I got to lose? I got nothing to lose.
It seems so logical with the way you're explaining it, but it's such a hurdle to get people over that to break through those stigmas. And a much less degree, you think about, some of the things I was just talking about with going to South by Southwest and talking about leadership and some leaders with serious addiction problems,
right.
Owning that and coming forward, the fear of what might possibly happen with coming through versus what actually will happen if you stay using. If you stay in your course, this is going to fall apart. If you just step up and face this fear and move forward, you'll be fine. And what you're talking about here is, this prevention, maybe it might offend your kids if you go after them. Caitlin, you talk about times when you weren't exactly happy with your mother, or law enforcement for taking you out of the game for a little bit, but it saved your life. There's these times when we have to be parents and step in, and I think that you guys sound like you did as much as you possibly could, but
we certainly did a lot of yelling and fighting.
Yeah.
Which, was it helpful? I don't know if it's helpful, but as a parent, you do your parenting thing, however the best way.
Drove them to meetings and took them, we did whatever we could.
It just sounds to me like you did face it through it, even though the shocking result was there, but you did face it. I feel like there's a lot of families out there that hide from it.
We did. Originally we did. When we first found out our son was a heroin addict, we only told a couple people in the family. And because this was 2012, we had really didn't hear about the epidemic at the time. It was kind of in the early stages, and we were embarrassed. We didn't know how to talk about it.
I remember even earlier than that, when Marshall was in high school, and Jonathan was visiting us at a good friend of ours, and he's in recovery himself, and Marshall got a ticket, a DUI, and we were, and it was still kind of out of left field at that time. We thought he was smoking pot, and it's only pot, and then we were a little bit more concerned about it, and then he got this ticket. I was telling Jonathan, like, the kids these days, country roads. And Jonathan looked at me and he said, Donna, this is serious. And with him confronting me on that, I also got a check where, look at this differently. Think about this differently. And that's when I started dragging him to the Crosswinds, the recovery.
Celebrate recovery.
Yeah, celebrate recovery, and I'd be crying, and you know what? He would go. But I would have to say, we're going now, and just literally, like, get him in the car, and he would go, but it wasn't what he wanted to do. It wasn't in his heart.
Yeah.
My parents were doing the same thing in my 40s, so I mean, it's probably not as uncomfortable.
Parents.
I stuck around though.
Yeah. Good.
Well, and I don't think there's anything about this that's being critical of parents aren't doing enough, or I think the general message is, let's shatter the stigma.
Yeah.
Right.
Have the conversations. All deaths can't be prevented.
Right.
Ultimately, we all die, right? So it's not that you can prevent everything, but you can be more engaged, and it's okay to have these conversations. And I think that's where the power of your message comes through, because you are having that message, and now you're producing it in a documentary that's going to, I think it's going to really blow some people away. And it would be my hope that, coming back just to this narrow lane that I touch in, is to make sure that people are willing to have the conversation that says, here's your alternative. Yeah. You can jump in now and you can have the conversation and do your part, or you can have the difficulty later with a possible death or incarceration or something else. So the choice is obvious, and sometimes people don't recognize that there actually is a choice to be made. They think that not doing something is not really making a choice because they just don't know how to handle it. Go find a place like Connections. Go find other resources. Go find parents, like Donna and Dewey, that can speak to the gravity of this. And I love the conversation that they had between the two of them that said, hey, no, this is serious. And to have that that speaks to your relationship, which is great. Not all homes have, two parents. Not all friends have good friends that are willing to confront them. But I think the general message is here: have the conversation, get rid of the stigma, because if stigma holds you back now, it could pin you in a really deep hole later.
Yep, you're going to be I lost my thought. I had a dream, and Marshall said, and dreams now are different if Marshall's involved. It's more of an event, where he said, the high is not worth death.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And in some ways I don't understand that, but I know he's talking to people out there, he's watching over so people don't do too much.
Yeah, this is a nasty, dirty business, and you got to get down in the trenches, right? We got to do whatever we can do.
Well, and I would say, before we get to the end of the show, just thank you both so much, because you had a choice as well. You could have sat in the rubble. We talk about a ground zero event, that you hit a ground zero event, and you could have sat there in the rubble, but you chose to get up and literally start on this journey. And it's not just the documentary, it's the fact that you're willing to share this message with others instead of just suffering in silence, or letting this absolutely destroy you. You're carrying the load for other parents, even though they don't understand. You're carrying the load for them because you're trying to help them. You're trying to help the friends and the family members of people with substance abuse issues, or with other mental health issues, or something else that might be holding someone back, and you're out there telling them. And so thank you both so much for doing this. The little bit that I've been able to learn about the story and about this production that you're doing, it is amazing, and it does speak to your strength. And I can't imagine, like Chris said, doing this in such a raw chapter of your life, but it's going to be so powerful for so many people.
Well, thank you very much.
I can tell you.
Thank you.
I can tell you from my perspective, what Brian's saying is true, because when you're telling your stories here in this calm setting like that, I just want to go fight with you, because it's hard. But it's hard not to embrace your heart. I mean, I'm kind of a passionate knucklehead. It's got me in trouble a couple times too. But I believe so much in what you're doing, and it really kind of stirred some thoughts in my head. You're familiar with Simone Okram in the recovery community. She does the Chasing Nirvana Clean. She's been on the show, and she really focuses in on saying, our war stories are one thing, but what does our recovery story look like? And I'd like to kind of shift the interview a little bit towards that. You guys are on this journey. You're doing this phenomenal work that we're all obviously really behind, and I believe so much in the way you're handling it. I'm just curious, as you're going through this, I'm not saying that you're healed, but there are some healing moments. What are some of the things that you're noticing as you continue to progress along this, even in the early stages, some things that you can start saying, okay, that's hope. That starts to feel like we're doing something.
We're getting out of bed.
Okay.
I mean,
serious.
we have a focus where, for me, it's I have something positive I can take myself and I can put it into, and it doesn't have to be a movie or documentary, but that's. I can't tell you how much it's helped me I can't say get over the grief. Get through the grief, maybe deal with it to have something to cling to work on that's positive. Otherwise, really, you want to just stay in bed. We how many days we just stayed in bed or hid in our apartment,
weird.
or
it's weird.
Don't want to go to Wegmans because I don't want to see anybody. This is helping us get out. So it is healing,
You think about that, though. That, to me, is an indication that you're going to make the greatest impact. And here's why, as a mindset, I believe this. If you follow fighting at all, there's the championship rounds. Those championship rounds are typically the most grueling. Even the winner usually takes the biggest beating in those rounds. But the ones that make a difference are the ones that make it through those rounds, no matter what. So even if the loser in a lot of those times, the greatest fights of all times were people that just kept going in those rounds. I believe that where you guys are at personally, it's got to be unbelievably challenging, and so many new things. Even now, you don't even know what you're going to face.
Yeah, but it's I'm just in my mind. I'm thinking love wins. Okay, that there's hurdles. This coronavirus might get in the way.
Oh, I'm going no matter what. I'm walking no matter what.
Good.
Yeah.
But the love that people have just showered upon us. And without that, Kevin and Mary are here supporting us.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without Kevin and Mary.
They're behind the scenes for the audience.
Yeah.
Without support, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Here we are. We're here speaking out, standing up, being strong because of support.
Yeah.
And so many parents are out there with very little support, and how we can all just support each other and help each other. And their kids, and they don't know what to do. Love wins. If we can just support, we can lift people up.
Yeah.
So that's what it's really, got me to be more fearless about that.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I want to thank Kevin and Mary, because they're our teammates on this project, and without them, they're putting in a lot of work on this project. I mean, hours and hours and hours. And they bring a skill set that Donna and I don't have. And we have skills, but they have other skills. And we couldn't do this project without a team. And it's a blessing that we have people who want to put that time in, that energy in, and then all the people volunteering, again, like Caitlin, who are taking time and coming and doing interviews, meeting us down in Bath for an interview, meeting us in Geneva. Where the people are taking time and really helping us.
People have called up and said, "Hey, can we go with you?"
Just to help set up and to
or on the pilgrimage.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We got
13
people.
But the thing, look at what that represents.
Yeah.
So that the on the outside, there's one thing if we could feel bad for your situation. I'm sure a lot of people feel bad for your situation, but you inspire action. One of the things that we talked about a lot of times here is we talk about inspiration, which is the thought, and motivation is the motor, the action.
Yeah.
And then out of that hopefully comes some education to understand the situation you're in. And what you're doing is you're actually not only inspiring people that there's a way to move forward, but you're actually motivating people to want to get behind your message. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And to me, that says you have the groundwork for some serious change that you can cause. You're a lightning rod of an opportunity here
Yeah.
that other people don't have. I mean, it's not a competitive thing. We talk a lot, Caitlin and I, and Brian, we're actually just having, we rant to each other a lot. And this was supposed to be a pre-production call we had yesterday. It turned into a big competition rant, but we were having fun. The point is that you're not in competition. It doesn't even seem like that. It just seems like such an outstanding thing that you're doing with such a terrible loss. For me personally, a lot of even the way I look at things has changed just from my limited exposure to what you're doing. It really is impactful, and I hope that gives you some sense that there's tremendous value in what you're doing, even though you're still feeling all that you're feeling. I know it's not about a project. It's about who you two are as human beings and how it's a call to action for all of us. There's no excuse why we can't go out and try to save lives here.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes I think that drug dealer, he messed with the wrong family.
Possibly.
You know, right? And recovery is now the thing to do.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just in some weird way blessed too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you're going through this, what are some of the things you guys have coming up? I mean, we know of the actual main project, but where are you guys at? I mean, fundraising, events, these types of things.
Fundraising's going well. We've got most of the, first off, I'll say any money raised for the project that doesn't go for Donna or my daughter's travel or anything like that. So all the money goes to camera equipment, post-production, some equipment we need for the travels. And
Marketing.
Marketing, but we're doing well on most of that, but the tail end is probably where we're going to need a little extra money when it comes to the editing aspect. But we've got a couple big interviews coming up in March that we'll finish up, and so probably by mid-April we'll have most of the interviews, which will be, I don't know, maybe 15 or so interviews in the bag.
So were you thinking when you went into this doing 15 interviews?
No.
I was like, interviews? Why do we need interviews?
We didn't know anything about anything. That's if we would have known what we know now, we probably wouldn't have gotten into this project because it's like
we would have.
Yeah,
I think we would have done something.
But,
The worst part about projects like this is innovation.
yeah.
Because you're like, what if we?
Yeah.
Turns another 15 minutes into it.
We have a GoFundMe page.
Marshall's Way.
Marshall's Way. We have opiate angels, where we're honoring people if they send their name of their loved one that's died in a picture. We're going to honor them in the documentary.
Right.
Nice.
And they can send that to marshallsway1@gmail.com. It's the number 1, all one word, Marshall's Way.
Okay.
And we have, so that's cool.
Yep.
So that's actually through email that they're good. So
Yeah, we
Okay.
can get a better photograph,
Right.
image from Gmail.
Yeah, because again, maybe it's a small way, but it's a way we think. Donna coined the frame.
Families are burying their kids and no one shows up. That's just wrong.
Right.
Or they don't say, oh, they died unexpectedly. It's like, and that burden of, that mystery and shroud. Families split up, with the death of a child and how to, stand up, be loud, be proud, and let this shine. So some people are really grateful, or their friends have died, and they're not able to go to the funeral.
Yeah, and just because they might have had a substance abuse disorder, that shouldn't be the only defining thing about these people's lives. These people were fathers and brothers and uncles and employees and artists, and I mean, they lived lives. So should that be the only defining thing about these people? I don't think so. I think there's so much so let's see their picture. Let's honor these people. Yeah, okay, they got a crappy end of the stick, but they are still valuable people,
With a lot of other things.
Yeah, with a
Yeah.
lot of other things about them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a side thing.
Yep.
What else do we have going on?
Well, the trip, we're getting close. We're within a couple of months, so we're
I worked out this morning trying to get
you did?
the muscles.
we're doing a lot of walking. Well, we were till the weather changed, but 2 weeks ago we got 3 weeks ago we got 14 miles in, because the first day of our trip is like a 17-mile trek.
Okay.
It's the worst one.
So that's gonna be tough, but we're working out,
So should we do like the Santa tracker on GPS to see if she actually makes it?
Yeah. Oh, I'm carrying her. I tell you, she'll make it. She's tougher than I am. So she's small, but she's spunky.
Yeah,
So.
I'll wear these at my own.
Yeah, high heels.
Get you one of those backpacks that just you put your babies in.
Yeah, right. So that's just, we're planning the trip, and we're refining some of the audio problems we're having, because audio is like a big part of the thing, and how we're going to film it.
Learning how to do the drone.
Oh yeah.
His whole purpose. Well, he's a good friend too. He's coming with us to do a drone, so you can have video from up there.
We all got titles. He's the drone guy. Okay,
Drone
so we got a grip. We got a drone guy. We got a writer. We got the director.
We got the yoga.
Yeah.
And we have the spiritual advisor.
So we're having fun with it too.
Yeah.
Because not everything is gloom and despair.
Right.
It was for the first year plus, but we're trying to move forward.
See, that's the beauty of doing work like this, getting out and doing something with it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you overexhaust yourself, but if you do something with it, you do find new hope.
Right.
Brian talks about this a lot, is that we can't get our lives back, but we can have this new life, embrace it, and go forward with it. That's the ground zero.
Right.
What do you do from that point forward?
Right. Does it define you, or so?
Thanks, Brian.
Is there anything else that we need to be aware of in terms of timelines, fundraising events? Do you have a specific target that you're looking for that we can help get a shout out so people can chase a number?
Well, we're trying to get $20,000 and or over. It's going to take every penny of that. And who would have thought that producing a little film would cost so much money? And part of it is going...
Scott Fitzgerald would know that.
Yeah, right. And part of it is the trip, but the trip, I think, is visually going to be a key element of the thing, is the metaphor and the visual and the whole storyline. So it's a key element to the movie. But, that, and I don't know, what do you think, hon?
Timeline?
No, as far as anything else people can do, or... reach out to us, for one thing.
Tell your kid you love them.
Yeah.
Say I love you to your child. I can't remember if I did that when I last saw Marshall, and so I'm just like, putting it forward. Say I love you to your kids.
And if someone doesn't know where to go, and you hear this, you can always send us to Marshall's Way 1 Gmail, and if you're having troubles, we're going to send you to somebody like Caitlin or whatnot that maybe can help you. So please reach out to us if you need something at all.
That's awesome. Well, we're at a point now where we're going to wrap up, but I can't put words around what I believe personally about you two. I know it's hard. This is particularly hard for Caitlin, and the love she has for you and what you're all about and her personal story. Work you do actually changes lives. It has mine. It's impacted people around you on a daily basis. Just the effort that you're doing. Quite honestly, even when you look at how you're doing this, how you're doing what you're doing on $20,000, I have no idea. That just shows the motivation, the heart behind it. Scott almost fell out of his chair when he found out that you were doing it for that little.
We're also putting.
We put a bunch of our own money into it, but
I just want to applaud you for what you're doing. It is making an absolute impact now, and you're not even done.
No, thank you.
So
we're on our journey, like you said.
So Brian, I don't know if you want to start to bring us home here.
Yeah, well, again, thank you both so much. And I think of all the kind of different levels of the metaphor, and this trek that you go on, that you're building a roadmap for others to go through grief, and yet at the same time you are trying to swim upstream and tell other people to reach out and to get engaged. And your story lines right up with the mantra that I end with every time, and that's just that I'm not perfect. I have flaws. I have made terrible choices in my life, and I don't want to be known for that. But nobody's perfect. And it's to remember that when I encounter someone that's struggling, it's to remember that when someone that I care about is struggling, and to not just be hush about it, but to recognize there are times when I need people to reach into my life, and I need to be willing to reach into other people's lives. And then it's that idea that, I have value, and I do want close people around me to say something if I'm going off the rails. And everyone has value. I need to be willing to reach into the lives of other people. And lastly, I would say that in an ideal scenario, you have a tight, family and support group around you that can pour into you and can pull you aside and say, hey, we need to work on this, and we're going to be in this together with you. but not everybody has that. And I think as kind of I pass it over to Caitlin, I think she can really speak to this idea that there are resources there for the person that's struggling with something. Doesn't just have to be addiction. There can be a just place in life where you just don't know where to go. And there are resources for people like that. But then again, it's also for the friends and family of those people. There are resources to go be equipped as parents, to go be equipped as friends and family, to come alongside someone that you care about that you might not know what to say right now. But there are people out there willing to help you do that. And so, Caitlin, I hope as you wrap up that you can just touch a little bit again on some of the things going on at Connections that really are resources for everybody.
Yes. So I want to, Donna and Dewey, I think you're two of the bravest people that I've ever met. And I want to thank you because you've changed the game of grief for me. What got me into sobriety was by going to a grief group. That's how it started. So I think that this is a topic that is so intertwined and prevalent, especially within the life we live today. And it needs to be talked about just like everything else. So, I know you're impacting many, but I want you to know that you've forever changed my life. So you can take that with you everywhere on your pilgrimage. You've changed my life.
And you're wonderful. Yeah.
And Marshall, I want to say Marshall was literally one of the kindest individuals I have ever met in my entire life. So I feel very fortunate to have met him. And, he's obviously so much more than the hell he went through. So there are resources available. That willingness factor is always necessary. And just knowing that you're not alone. There are people that can understand and get you. There's formal treatment opportunities that, peers can link you within the Connections atmosphere there. And just, pick up your phone and call someone. And I like what you said, Donna, that, tell your child you love them. That's so important. So thank you.
Yeah, it's powerful. And thank you again for coming on here. Obviously, Caitlin's personal connection to you is huge. This was a tough interview on our end for Caitlin as well, just trying to prepare for this because for our audience, the Marshall's Way Project matters. Put some effort behind this. Make sure you're watching the videos that are out there. There's some outstanding resources. It's being done so well. And get behind it any way possible because this is definitely going to change the game. It already has. You two are unbelievably brave, and I'm personally thankful to have met you. We believe on this show that change lives, and you're definitely doing that. So thanks to the audience for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the 100 Proof Living podcast. Please remember to rate and review this show wherever you get podcasts. It really helps. Get more information at 100proofliving.com.